Action Hour, I'm speaking with WEAN founder Marianne Edain about a recent WEAN case that has become known as Not in Our Parks, which ultimately culminated in a ruling in 2022 in a Thurston County court in WEAN's favor against the military. Against who was the actual defendant in that case, or who were you against in that case?
The actual defendant was the State Parks Commission. Which State Parks was the one to issue the permit to the United States Navy.
Okay. To start at the beginning, what exactly was the issue that presented itself that culminated into litigation on behalf of WEAN?
So going back all the way to 2017, the State Parks Commission meets in various locations around the state every third month, something like that. And that particular meeting was over in Leavenworth. And we picked ourselves up and drove there because one issue that was on their agenda was divesting themselves of 560 acres of tidelands in Useless Bay, including a chunk of Double Bluff Beach.
Really?
We thought that that was not a smart move. So we went to Leavenworth and spoke eloquently. And much to our shock and surprise, the State Parks Commission decided not to do that, to keep that land. But while we were there was this entire other presentation by Navy people about how they wanted to use state parks to train Navy SEALs in sneaking around in the dark and spying on people. And we were absolutely floored and thought, this is insane. This is nuts. This is not what we do with our parks. And then it just kind of disappeared for several years. Until evidently during that period, the Navy was doing its paperwork and writing an EA, an environmental assessment at the federal level. And they submitted mountains of paperwork to the state park system. And I cannot remember exactly when they submitted, but I think it was around 2020. And what we hadn't known was that up until the early 2000s, the Navy was just using our parks and never mind asking. They just did it.
Oh, what changed in the early 2000s where they had to at least ask?
Somebody out on the peninsula, a park manager, I think, or a park environmental officer out there said, "Well, what's this? What's going on? Did anybody ask?" And the Navy kind of, "Whoa, we've always done it this way." And State Parks said, "Well, maybe not." And they then gave a permit to use 5 parks, and they did it through the real estate division. And it's like, nobody knew anything about it. The real estate division, without any kind of public notice, just said, "Okay, fine, you can use these parks."
Really? Okay. And this was this in the early 2000s that happened, or was this in 2020 when
I think it was 2005.
2005. Okay. So this was when they initially got permission from Washington State, the Washington State Parks Commission, or the Washington. Yeah. In order to use 5 parks, you're saying that in order to conduct surveillance, or what were they doing?
They never use the word surveillance. I mean, the euphemisms are many. During the late stages of the process, one of the things I challenged in their environmental assessment was, no, we don't do surveillance, but we are we are authorized to observe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I raised the issue of, would you care to explain the fine difference between?
We asked that many times and never got an answer.
Anyway, so they went up from 5 parks to 14 without anybody noticing. And again, this was through the real estate division. And it's like nobody quite understood why, why the real estate division. Mm-hmm. And then they submitted, their enormous, the environmental assessment ran to well over 1,000 pages.
Wow. And the environmental assessment it's not an environmental impact statement that people do through the State Environmental Policy Act. An environmental assessment that's an internal environmental document.
Well, it was the Navy produced the document, and it came out of Washington, D.C., and it was in response, I think. Okay, so we have SEPA in Washington. There's NEPA at the national level.
Yep.
And an environmental assessment is usually a NEPA response.
Oh, okay.
So the Navy did their assessment, and I spent about 4,000 words ripping it to shreds. Mm-hmm. And basically, all of the mitigations in health and safety had to do with protection of the trainees.
And so not the parks or the other people in the parks at all. Yeah.
Or in some instances down on the Long Beach Peninsula, we've got a listed species of bird that nests on those beaches. Mm-hmm. And, in over 1,000 pages of EA, the only reference to the birds was, it's okay, they won't step on the nests.
Right, which is obviously not actually a comprehensive environmental impact assessment at all. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, okay, my field is botany and restoration ecology.
Yep.
Don't step into my backyard and try to teach me to suck eggs. Mm-hmm. So their staff person in Washington, D.C. wrote lovingly about the madrona forests in Washington. I have yet to see a madrona forest.
I was going to say, I have never also seen a madrona forest. I've seen a madrona tree in a forest.
Yes. Anyway, there were many such, things that to me just, beep all over.
Right. Like there was no bioregional awareness. Like they didn't actually have someone come and do a real assessment on the ground. They didn't use people who are, experts in their field like you or someone else to actually assess the environment.
Right.
Yeah. So, it was like somebody at a desk in Washington, D.C., just Googling things or looking in books and then writing about it. Potentially. Yep. Yeah.
And egregious errors, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And, after I got done steaming, I had a lot of fun tearing apart their egregious errors. Mm-hmm. But the upshot was that this whole enormous document simply didn't address the actual questions and the actual situations. Mm-hmm. And when state parks so state parks asked the Navy to submit. At that point, we were looking at 28 parks.
Was this in 2017 or 2020?
2020, 21.
Okay. So you're looking at 20. And was this when you went through the environmental assessment? Was in 2020, 2021? Okay, cool.
And so the Navy submitted their 28 applications to state parks, and I reviewed every single one of them, and they were basically duplicates, the same language except for the location of a particular park.
Oh, so they really didn't even try very hard to okay. Yeah, wow. So, literal copy paste language.
Oh, absolutely. So the specific location of the park and the specific acreage of the park. But one of the questions that state parks asked was, please narrow down the specific area within a park. And the answer would be this park is 1,078 square miles or acres, I'm sorry. And, what part of the park was never addressed.
So it was assumed that it was like all of the park.
Yeah.
So they didn't specify, and they were like, we are going to, quote, observe. We're not going to use surveillance or participate in surveillance. We are going to observe the public in any part of this park.
Well, their claim was that they weren't going to observe anybody but each other. Their scenario was that they had trained actors who would be, quote, the public or whatever the subject of the observation. Then they would have the trainees who were doing the observing. But then they would have a third contingent, and those were kind of the managers and oversight people.
Okay.
And the guy that we first saw in 2017, dressed up in his fancy uniform and all the spaghetti and stuff, he testified.
By spaghetti, are you talking about his uniform?
On his lapels.
Okay.
And on his hat.
Okay.
Anyway, at the final hearing, he testified that why he had, on occasion, wearing nothing but jeans and a T-shirt, sat down on a park bench next to a member of the public and engaged them in conversation in such a way as to divert their attention from what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah. We were not impressed.
Right. And so let me kind of get this sense. So the United States Navy, prior to the early 2000s, they had been using our parks without our knowledge for training purposes related to what they were calling observation for the Navy SEALs.
The specifics, the description of the training, first of all, these are Navy SEALs in training.
Navy SEALs in training. Okay.
That they would be brought in by a Navy ship offshore.
Mm-hmm.
They would get into single-person mini submarines and pilot themselves to the shore. They would exit their submarines. They would sneak across the shoreline and up the face of the bluff, since most of our shoreline parks have bluffs, and then hide themselves in the vegetation and observe. Okay. And so for up to 72 hours.
For up to 72 hours. Okay. So they were coming in from offshore and then scrambling and hiding in the vegetation for multiple days.
Yeah.
But they, prior to 2005, they were doing this without our knowledge. Then state parks found out about it and they were like, have you asked us to do this? And then the Navy got permission for 5 parks, which then by the time you all became aware of it and were tracking it in 2020, it was 28 parks.
No, it was 14.
14. Okay. So it was 14 parks, but they had submitted applications for a total of 28.
That's right.
Okay. So they were operating in 14 parks, but they submitted applications for 28 parks. And they were claiming that while conducting this operation, they were only, quote, observing each other, only people within the training program, but they were positioning themselves in the vegetation for 72 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because I'm trying to get the scope of this, because it's to give people an idea of exactly what we're working with. And that is okay. That gives me a lot of context for this. And so for, up until 2020, 2021, there were 14 parks in the state of Washington where this was happening, known to the Washington State Parks Commission, but unknown to the public.
Right. Now, one of the people in our core group actually witnessed this in the early 2000s up in the San Juans.
Really?
I mean, that's why he became part of our core group, because he had actually experienced it. And his story was that he's a kayaker, and he and a group of other people, they all went kayaking around the smaller islands, and they were camped on one of those smaller islands. And, in the middle of the night, this great big Navy ship comes, and all of these people in camo comes, swarming on shore and climbing up, and they're all in their tents, and they're going, "Oh, Jesus, Henry, what's going on here?" Mm-hmm. Mostly they climbed back in their tents and zipped them shut.
Right. But even just that one experience shows you that it impacts the public directly.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And that it's not, it's not happening in a vacuum, which was basically what the Navy was claiming, that this is happening in a vacuum.
I mean, and this was, as I say, the early 2000s, very early. Mm-hmm. And it happened. Everybody went about, the kayakers finished their kayaking trip and they went home and more or less forgot about it. And then when this came to light again, this person in the San Juans, Alan, said, "Oh, that's what that was about." And he made that connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you first find out about this when you travel to a Washington State Parks Commission meeting in Leavenworth in 2017 because of a different agenda item, which was, the Parks Commission potentially selling part of Double Bluff Beach. Was that? Yeah. Which they chose not to do. Thank you very much. But it's one of those things that I think is really interesting about that is that, like, showing up and being there, you might have never known about this if you and Steve hadn't driven all the way to Leavenworth for a very different thing.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, it's just like, once again, another example of why showing up is so important.
Absolutely. Now, a bit of irony, when we got to Leavenworth, there were some islander people, and I thought, oh, they're there for Double Bluff. No, they weren't. They knew. They knew about the Navy, and they were part of the the Friends, the Quaker contingent here on the island.
Oh, okay.
And Quakers, they were there to say that's not what our parks are about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So then, you said in 2017 you learn about it, and then it kind of disappears for a while, and then pops back up a few years later. Were you all, tracking this in the background, or how did you find out about it again? How did it reappear?
I'm not even sure. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things that, you sort of vaguely tracking state parks and their agendas, and it's, oh, really? Look at this interesting agenda item.
Okay. Yeah. So just general tracking, because you and Steve have a practice of tracking the agendas of lots of different, commissions and councils. And that's kind of, in terms of local government, that's a way to know what's going on.
It's the only way to know.
Yeah. Yeah. The only way to know. In 2021, the Navy resubmits permit applications for 28 parks. So they're trying to expand their operations. What, at that time, do you remember what the 14 parks were that they were operating in?
I've got a list somewhere, but mostly out on the peninsula.
I assume they're all parks that have shoreline access.
Yes, they do. And I think the two that were different from the boilerplate applications was the one down on Long Beach, because Long Beach is a spit. It's a sand spit. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And the other one was Deception Pass, where they were going to somehow climb the face of the bluff, right by the bridge.
Wow.
And end up in the parking lot right at the south end of the bridge.
Wow.
Let's see, GMHB cases, that wasn't. Excuse me.
No worries.
Aaron's Public Works Planning. Open Space Partnership PDA. I figured it out.
Woohoo!
Okay, so we've got background information, we've got our internal docs, we've got litigation, we've got the Navy's application. There was a story in the New York Times, no less. Navy orders high-level outside investigation. That's much later. Okay. And there was our guy Larry over in Port Townsend. Let's see, background information. And economic analysis. Yes, some of these parks were also part of the Cascadia Marine Trail.
Oh, okay.
Now, part of the Cascadia Marine Trail is that if you're kayaking out there, you have a right to come into any of these locations, no matter what's going on, because maybe there's a storm brewing, maybe you're getting sick, maybe you're very tired, whatever. Mm-hmm. Kayakers have an absolute right to come into those places. Mm-hmm. So what if the Navy's using it for training? And one of the things that was in their documentation was that we may have to redirect boaters.
Right, which could impact their safety.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am curious about that, like in terms of, what aside from the fact that it is very disconcerting for the Navy to be observing members of the public without their knowledge and taking over space, like public space, without, as if it's their own. What are some of the other kind of environmental and public impacts that WEAN identified when going through the process of determining whether or not to litigate?
We actually, at first, it was quite a board discussion about, hey, this is not front and center to what we do. Mm-hmm. And the more we looked at it, the more we said, you're right, it's not front and center to what we do, but it's still very important. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it would be what we won on the SEPA issue that the state parks had failed to consider the impact on the visitor experience. And that is a SEPA issue. It's clearly stated in the SEPA checklist. And that's what the judge talked about, and one of the members of the State Parks Commission, she lives on the island now. She lives around Freeland. Mm-hmm. Her name is Sophie Dannenberg. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she talked about the creep factor. That would you want to go camping in this park knowing that somebody might be sneaking around outside your tent?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely not. You wouldn't feel safe. It would disrupt your experience. That's like not what a park is for, right? It's not what a state park is for. It's not what a public park is for, Yeah.
So Sophie Dannenberg, in the discussions, of the State Park Commission, kept using that term, the creep factor. Mm-hmm. And one of my assignments from the attorney was, of the thousands of comments that we received, that mm-hmm. State Parks received and that we got through a public records request, through a whole bunch of them, mm-hmm. was to pull out all the creep factor comments. And there were tons of them.
Yeah, I was reading this article, that we had written on our website, and it said something like there were 7,000 public comments.
Yeah, upward of 7,000, and those are only the ones I was able to log in, because the public records officer at State Park would do these blurts, of hundreds and hundreds of emails in one big swamp, mm-hmm. and I would plow my way through them, and then he would do another blurch, mm-hmm. and I never even got to the last one or two of those.
Okay.
So more comments than that. But so, I was extracting the ones that talked about creep factor, grandma's saying, well, I can't take my grandkids there if that's going to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was one of our exhibits, was just, comment after comment after comment about, this creeps me out. And this creeps me out enough that I will not go there, even though I used to. And in fact, Craig Sear, he was part of the core group. Craig and his wife, Susan, it's one of their bucket list life things to visit every state park and to camp in every single state park. And Craig wrote this, rather impassioned letter testimony saying, this life goal of ours, you guys are cutting it off because we're not about to go camp in a place where we think that might be happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
that's really interesting that ultimately, like when this finally came to court, it was the creep factor on the SEPA checklist.
Yep. And if you listen to the judge, the part that we have on the website, he actually says, I really looked around for alternative language to this term, the creep factor, and I couldn't find any other language to describe this. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, it's creepy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's creepy behavior. And it's really interesting. It's very interesting that creepy behavior from a legal standpoint can have such weight, right? But also the military operating in clandestine ways on public property is deeply, deeply concerning, right? It's like, of course it's going to impact your experience. How are you going to enjoy a park when you have, potential like people climbing up the walls from submarines or like climbing up the bluff, that's just not, it doesn't make people feel like the park is for their enjoyment.
The scenario that various people brought up time and again is we have a lot of veterans with PTSD. We have a lot of homeless veterans with PTSD who happen to own weapons.
Yeah.
Not be at all unusual or surprising to find one of those ensconced in the woods in the state park, even though that may not be allowed. And that kind of person is in fact trained to catch, to spot, oh, there is somebody sneaking up on me.
Yes. Yes. Especially, I mean, my brother, served in Afghanistan and he came back with PTSD. And when he first came home, before he had, really gone through therapy, the therapeutic process, was very heightened, aware of his surroundings in a way that was, as if he were still in a combat zone.
Exactly.
And if you are then confronted with a combat scenario, you're going to behave as if you're in a combat scenario. Like it would take all of your faculties and your training, your coping mechanism training. I mean, like psychological training to be able to stop yourself from responding in a way that you've been trained to respond, actually,
Exactly. And we raised that time and again that there actually was a case in, I think it was North Carolina, but don't quote me on that one, where they were doing one of these exercises there, but nobody told the local cops.
Oh.
And so these guys are dressed in, these were the ones who were supposedly the bad guys. They're dressed in jeans and T-shirts and stuff. And they've got a truckload of what looks like large guns. And the local sheriffs thought they were dealing with, I don't know, gun smugglers, bad guys. And
guys in the vehicle thought were big sheriff.
I can't hear you, Steve.
So the guys in the jeans and T-shirts, they thought the sheriffs were in on it, so they acted out as if they were the bad guys. And they got these two sheriff's deputies responded as a sheriff's deputy would in that situation and shot him.
Yep.
And I mean, it turned into a big thing. It went on for years, and eventually the county ended up paying the families, I think it was $750,000. I don't know if that's enough to pay for, getting killed. But anyway, the thing is, there is that example, and, it is not a far-fetched scenario.
No, and it does say that they were dressed in full battle gear with realistic looking guns. That they were dressed in that way, which, even if you weren't a veteran with PTSD, we do live in a gun carrying state. Like people are armed, also the public sometimes. And so it's putting people in a situation that's really, pretty dangerous for different reasons.
It's basically, waving the red flag in front of the bull.
Yeah. Yeah. And the judge ultimately agreed to that.
Yes.
But it took, you all started, when did you start the litigation process and how long was it until it was heard in court?
I have here litigation. Let's see, January of 21, we were submitting comments. Let's see, there was a hearing in April of, that went all the way to 22. There was a hearing. So let me see the NIAP hearing that was, let's make that. That was WEAN v. Washington State Parks Commission in front of Judge Dixon. That was April 1st, 2022, in front of the judge. Okay, that was, so between January of 21 and April of 22. And let me see if I can find, let's see, we've got the work plan, coalition.
Yeah. So what was the coalition around this? Like in terms of...
We created a list of like-minded organizations and invited them to join in. And a fair number of them did. There were 20 some odd coalition member groups.
Cool. And
some of them donated significant chunks of money, much appreciated. And they put it out to all of their members. And, that caused the thing to snowball statewide.
Yeah, well, right, because it is a state issue. It's potentially impacts parks all over the state. There's something here that says, so you formed the coalition, and before you went to trial, before you filed, it looks like, there was a lot of public engagement around the initial State Parks Commission vote, right? That when they were voting on, because I'm kind of, I guess I'm trying to understand the process of the permitting process and how the State Parks Commission works and what exactly they were voting on, before you all decided to go to court.
An excellent point, because it was really convoluted and complicated. So at some point, and I cannot remember when, the State Parks Commission directed the staff that they were to evaluate this proposal and do the homework and bring it back to the commission. And the commission's decision was to hand off the decision to staff.
The decision of whether or not to accept the permit applications from the Navy?
Yeah. The commission basically punted to staff and said, you guys decide. But in doing that, there was the subtext of you should decide in their favor.
And the staff was who were these staff members that were put in charge of this decision?
It's a fairly small group of people. It's a very tight organization, Washington State Parks.
Okay.
You've got the parks director. You've got 3, 4, maybe 5 assistant directors for various subdivisions.
Okay.
And then you have things like environmental staff who are, doing the research and things like that. And there was this internal thing going on that the SEPA responsible official was gung-ho pro-Navy, and we actually found documentation in all of those emails back and forth with, there was a Navy representative who was having lunches with the SEPA responsible official.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, but the staff under her doing the actual review, they were looking at the environmental impacts. Mm-hmm. And they created this enormous spreadsheet that I had all the trouble in the world dealing with because there were all these subsets of the spreadsheet. But it showed all of these adverse impacts that they were identifying, and then it would go up to the SEPA responsible official and she would ignore it.
Interesting. Okay. So there was some staff that was alerting, the Parks Department and specifically the SEPA responsible official that doing this had adverse environmental impact.
Yes. Just because of the way they run things, I don't think that spreadsheet ever got any farther. The SEPA responsible official just killed it. And I'm finding internal staff emails saying, expressing outrage. So the staff among each other are saying, did you see what she did? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, it did not change the SEPA responsible official's behavior.
Right. Right. And then ultimately the State Parks Commission was, did they vote to have the staff decide? How did they go about that?
They actually did. And then at the very end, staff brought it back to them and said, okay, now it's in your court. And they voted 4-3 in favor.
Right.
And that's when we went to court.
Right. And you worked with Zach Griffin and Brian Telligen?
Yeah. And they are good. Those two are really good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it looks like the 2 points, the 2 case points, one was the State Parks Commission overstepped its authority in granting the permits. Yep. And 2, they had failed to consider the adverse impacts on public recreation. And we talked a little bit about that. We talked about the creep factor, but I'm curious about the overstepping the authority and granting the permits. Like, what was the basis for that case point?
That if you look in all of the legislation that created the Washington State Parks and the State Park Commission, there's nothing in there that says they have the authority to grant that kind of a permit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What even is that kind of permit? Like, how is it described?
Good question. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of, is
it like a clandestine's activity permit? Because that's like,
it was never contemplated in the creation of state parks that they would be used for such a purpose.
Yeah. Yes, which is why ultimately I think the court ruled in your favor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is really wild to think about, the fact that they were granting permits to the Navy like that in the first place, and also that the Navy would honestly have the audacity to use public land for training in that way.
The weird socio-political things that were swirling around this was that somebody in the Navy got a hold of the Navy League, and the Navy League has a very big presence on Whidbey, of course. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we're getting hate mail and...
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've actually got a folder here of the hate mail. But also, challenges to our patriotism. And it's so much more important to have our Navy SEALs properly trained than it is for you to be able to go into the park. Mm-hmm. And, there was a fair amount of that kind of, I don't know what to call it, patriotic right-wing pushback. Mm-hmm. But, it brought forward the question, what are our parks for?
Yeah. Which is a really fundamental question. What are our parks for? Who are they designed to serve?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think that is a question that we are continuing to ask as an organization, with our latest complaint against the city of Oak Harbor. And it's a very different, situation, but it's related to public parkland, which it's interesting that we're once again, defending parks as an environmental organization. But
well, the thing is, parks, and I've run into this over the years, different people of different headspace have different idea of what you mean by parks.
Yeah.
Island County has a Island County Parks Department. It's under Public Works. And their idea of parks is, lawns and ball fields and recreation. Mm-hmm. Our idea of parks is a whole lot of trees, and yeah, you can walk there, but don't you be messing around.
You're right. Parks have a broad definition, depending on who you ask.
It's one of those things. Our state parks, unfortunately, all of our parks, our national and state parks outside of urban areas, have this conflicting dual purpose, one of which is people recreation and the other of which is retaining a functional ecosystem.
Yeah.
And
do you think they're at cross purposes, those two things?
Not necessarily, but often. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had one situation, there was an application for a Frisbee golf course in Rhododendron Park. And I have no clue what Frisbee golf is, but I learned, and while the applicants were saying, oh, no, we wouldn't cut down any trees, when I looked at what is, the people who make these courses, what do they want? And they want large areas with no trees. Mm-hmm. If you go into a place like Rhododendron Park, how do you have a large area with no trees?
Yeah, especially in that, and that park there is a part of that park that is a soccer field and has, there are fields already.
We fought and lost that one.
Mm-hmm. Which I've played on that soccer field. And I have to say, it was nice to have one. But the question is like, how much of that do you need? And what are you sacrificing to get it? And is it the right location for that thing?
Exactly.
Like asking the thoughtful questions about where and why, and whether or not it's in greatest service of the greatest good of all beings, right? Like there's a question about that. I'm curious about the award that you all were granted with the organization World Beyond War, and WEAN received the 2022 Organizational War Abolisher Award. Can you tell me about that?
It's wonderfully ironic. We were in really august company. People who were doing huge things in, all over the world. And here we are, piddling a little WEAN on Whidbey Island. But I'm not sure why they chose us, except that, and in part, we framed it as, is the military here to protect the civilian population, or is the civilian population here to be subservient to the purposes of the military? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was a big issue that was argued and discussed, and that's when the Navy League, came out of the woodwork and was jumping up and down. And we were saying that, civilian life is important, and that the military is a subset of that. They are there to protect the people. They are not there to make us subservient to their needs and purposes.
Right. And their agenda is not paramount.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we got the award, was that evidently that is not being articulated in a whole lot of places or very clearly.
Yeah, which is very interesting to think about. And I do think that living on an island that has a naval base, we as a community and as multiple communities on the island do think about it more, because it's interesting because we're like in the WUI, right? The like wildlife urban interface. Yep. And we are also in the naval base interface. Like,
very much so.
We're like both, dealing with like humanity coming up against what we consider, nature, and also our community coming up against military operations. Like the growlers are another huge issue on this island, the way that it impacts sensitive people, the way that it impacts wildlife, the way it impacts, people's general well-being. And that study that came out, in the Seattle Times that shows that it does have impact on the people.
Absolutely.
And I haven't experienced it a ton, but my family has land in Coopville, and the growlers do fly over that land. And I was walking through the woods one day, literally just walking the trails on the property. And when the growlers went overhead, it resonated through my body. I stopped thinking and I couldn't move. Like I felt like I was literally like, I stopped in my tracks and was like, I'm flooded right now. And I can't focus. I can't think. I can't hear. I can't do anything. And it, I was able to like snap out of it and like get out of the situation. Like, but I was thinking about what it would be like to be a dog or a small animal. Like I'm a larger animal, in the grand scheme of things. Like, what is that doing to a bird? or a squirrel or an owl or a deer, like what's happening to them when the growlers fly, so it is interesting to just think about like how we're constantly negotiating space. Yeah.
Some years ago, I talked the citizens of Eby's Reserve into doing an economic impact study, and they hired a very reputable economist, and he demonstrated that, in fact, every day that the Navy base is up there, it is costing the people of Island County money.
Yeah.
More than, we hear constantly about, we need the Navy. That's, our bread and butter. That's where all the money comes from. No, it turns out that if you look at actual costs, and he's upfront in his study said he was not able to quantify all the costs, so this was an underestimate. Mm-hmm. But it was a significant cost to the people of Island County to have the Navy there, even with just the limited factors that he was able to nail down.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I think that like the question that I have for the Navy is the same question that I have for us, which is how can we be better neighbors? Like how can we be better neighbors to wildlife and to ecosystems, like as human beings? And then how can the Navy be better neighbors to us, to the communities on this island? How can they be more thoughtful neighbors? Because
that assumes that that's a value of theirs. And I don't believe that that's really on their list of values.
Well, you might be right, but I think it's a conversation that I would like to have, because I think that the naval base disappearing altogether is not likely to happen.
Actually, back in 1991, it was on the base closure list. And the North End was doing backflips and shipping people off to DC to lobby and all the rest of it. But we actually, Steve and I, came up with a blueprint outline framework for what could and should happen to the North End if the Navy actually pulled out. So here's the scenario. The Navy owns 20 miles of shoreline on the North End. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine those 20 miles of shoreline as national seashore.
Yeah, I can imagine
and
that.
Imagine Oak Harbor as the place where people come and stay in hotels to go visit the national seashore. Mm-hmm. And imagine that you could walk all the way from the Port Townsend Ferry all the way up around Deception Pass and come back down on the other side. Okay, that would be a thing that people would do. And okay, so there's a lot of, what should I say, all of the military stuff that is there. So imagine the military industrial part of the base being turned into a center, a training center for oil spill response, and a place where, it's been less an issue recently. Thank you, Patty Murray, because she's the one who pushed to have the oil spill response tugboats in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Mm-hmm. They are stationed there just in case one of those big boys goes bad. Mm-hmm. But there needs to be a training center. There needs to be a stockpiling place. There needs to be, and that is relatively militaristic kind of stuff when you're, if an oil spill happens, you've got chains of command and all of that.
Yeah, you organize in a very, top-down way.
Yeah, and then much of the Navy base is degraded prairie. So imagine the enormous restoration work that could be done there, and imagine the center for doing restoration, working with PRI, to be growing plants for seeds and for transplant, to restore that entire area and make it part of the national park system.
I love that vision. The lovely world you've built, Marianne.
So the interesting thing, when back in 91, when all of this freak out was happening, there was an organization that was helping communities through the base closure process. They closed a whole lot of them in that period.
Yeah.
And they did a study on 5 years post base closure. What was the, what was the community looking like? What was it, financially mainly. And what they found was that every single community 5 years post base closure was doing better financially than when the base was there. And that the significant difference they were able to find was between those that recognized this is happening and did serious planning for it, and those that were dragged kicking and screaming through the process.
Why do you think they were doing economically better? Was it because part of me thinks that one of the issues, in addition to just like the general value system of the military and their operations in general, that there's a lot of transient people because they aren't able to invest in the community in the same way because they're on the move every 3 years about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there is not. Well, okay, so Oak Harbor has the distinction of being the most sought after final posting place for people who want to retire out of the Navy.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because my brother, my whole family's here because of the Navy, because my brother was stationed in Oak Harbor. And it was because after he served in Afghanistan and was back at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, that he wanted to get as far away as he could. And they were like, if you can get it, Whidbey Island's the place to get. And it was his first pick. And, and he got it. And obviously, he liked it so much. He liked Washington State so much that he stayed, but he's not in the military anymore. He chose to leave the military. And, he doesn't live on the island. He lives, in Stanwood, but I guess it was a highly desirable posting.
He's part of that statistic that those people who, it's the most desirable place for your last post.
Mm-hmm. And it was his last post. He just happened to be very young. He wasn't retiring, from a military career. He was leaving the military, entirely. Yeah. I guess I have a question to go back to Not in Our Parks.
Yeah.
Are there any significant ripple effects of your action that you know about?
I don't. I'm sure they're there. I'm sure there are more people in, visiting parks than would otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. So we were kind of floored that when we sued state parks, we assumed that the Navy would intervene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they did. It's like, it made us wonder, how important is this to them? I mean, after they've gone through all of this hooty-ha, back and forth, years and years. And then when it comes right down to the crunch, they did not move to intervene. And then when we won the case, there was no appeal.
Huh.
So and as far as I can tell, the Navy has never tried again. So, what was it that they were, was this one person's ambition? We're not understanding that. And, what has been the effect? Where are Navy SEALs training now? We don't know.
Right. Well, I think, what I think? Wait, now that you mention that, I wonder if it being so highly publicized made it not clandestine anymore and no longer viable as a training. If people know they're in the parks, then how are they going to train as if nobody knows they're there? The public's going to be looking for them.
Good point. Steve had all kinds of hilarious alternatives. Have
SEAL.
Find a Navy SEAL kind of games.
Plush stuffed seal.
Yes, win a plush stuffed seal.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Like a scavenger hunt, like a Navy SEAL scavenger hunt where the public goes out with a little board and you're just like, the person who finds the most Navy SEALs hiding in the bushes wins the raffle prize or whatever it is. But I don't know. Part of me thinks that might be why they didn't appeal and they didn't because how are they going to do that kind of operation if they're in plain sight?
Good point. It's something I had not thought about, but I think it's the best explanation I've heard thus far.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that maybe they had other places they could do it pretty easily and it wasn't worth the fight or the negative press.
They swore up and down that this was the only place where the water was cold enough, the shorelines were steep enough, and they had, lots of words about why this was the only possible place that this could happen.
Yeah, well, there must be other places.
Right.
I mean. That's interesting that we don't know where they're training now or how they've pivoted and that they didn't appeal at all. I do know that there are also other kind of clandestine programs happening off the coast of the peninsula. I went on a date with a guy who works in the marine mammal program for the Navy, and they do dolphin training.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we know about the dolphin training, and So they, damn it, leave them alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a 24/7 operation. And I mean, I don't know what they're doing with the dolphins, but they're doing it.
Things like training the dolphins to swim near certain ships, and they've got whatever recording devices and spy devices attached to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think at one point they were training them for suicide missions, and somebody got word, word got out, and they had to stop doing that.
Yeah, sounds like a good thing. I mean, I think that's kind of the trend is word got out and then they had to pivot, right? Because the military's always doing, I mean, secret things, like and with war in mind, right? Like they're in the business of war.
Yeah.
So
I would settle for, in the entire history of the United States military, they have never managed to pass an audit. Nobody knows where the money goes. Hundreds of billions of dollars. And if you ask, well, I don't know, but we need more. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And sure, there are the secret operations here and there, but fine, you got a pile of money that, here's this pile and this is for your secret operations. Don't come back for more. But nobody is willing to challenge the military on its budget.
That's a really interesting point. Very interesting.
Which means that they have the money to fly the guy with all the spaghetti on his shoulders who was doing the presentation in Leavenworth. They flew him in from Hawaii. And yeah, I know it's the U.S. Navy and they got all these, they're flying everything all over the place all the time anyway. But it's like, what are we doing? Flying people around the country to do dog and pony shows and then fly back to Hawaii and do whatever you're doing there. Well,
nowadays, everything can be a Zoom.
It can, but in this instance, it was not. And this guy actually, he flew out here from Hawaii a number of times. I mean, we met him time and again at these various meetings. And it's like, he's my brother, and he knows exactly what I think of this, works for Raytheon. And part of his job is to fly to DC and convince the federal government that they need the latest, whiz and bang that Raytheon has just created. And I mean, they're constantly, it's a completely distorted economy where these huge corporations make things that are intended to be used once and then they're gone.
Yes.
The thing with bombs and missiles is they are highly disposable.
Yes, they are.
And they're extremely expensive. And our federal military spends our tax dollars to buy those damnatious things and pile them up in great big piles. And then, I don't know, I gather they have a shelf life and then they have to destroy them.
Right. Which, yeah, I mean, it's a huge expense. And as you said, one that actually can't pass an audit because we're not even spending that money well.
No.
Or any kind of transparency for the public. I'm curious, do you have any other takeaways or any other thoughts you want to share about the Not in Our Parks case?
So the main takeaway that I really got from a whole lot of the other coalition groups and other people was that you can do this. Yes, we can challenge this huge, behemoth, and we can make a difference. We can do this thing. I think that was the empowerment that came out of that.
Yep.
Was huge.
Yep. Yep. I mean, that's my takeaway from your story of it is that, coalitions of concerned citizens, the public comment process can have huge impact, and paying attention is really important, right?
Yep.
That you have to be paying attention or you might miss these things. And in fact, people are hoping you do. Like, I really don't think the military was hoping that people were going to catch that they were doing this. They were going to try to slip in the permits and continue their operations. And it wasn't until the public became aware of it and became activated and educated that they then had to contend with it. And when they didn't contest it, as you said, because I think deep down they knew they were doing the wrong thing. Like it's how are they actually going to argue it? Right? Like at the end of the day, the fact that part of the winning strategy had to do with the clear trend of people, the public being creeped out by this program. Yeah. It was the sheer number of people who were like, I'm not going to the parks anymore because I feel creeped out by this. That ultimately had the greatest impact. That's really powerful.
Yeah. I think so. And as I say, the empowerment that, yes, you can. Yes, we can. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, it cost us $100,000.
Yep.
And that was kind of a big and scary commitment.
Yes.
But, when you know you're right, you just got to move forward and have a certain amount of faith that people will come through.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I think that's a great place to end it, and we'll be, continuing to share stories of WEAN's actions, past actions, and also updating people on current actions which are in motion. So thank you, Marianne, for this conversation, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Another man up in the pulpit in the state house, head of the table with a black pen, scratching egos, talking too loud, externalize every outcome, every warm gun, every profit, and kneeling down to the flashing numbers, the NASDAQ, the cold constructs, running backwards, so just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. I'm learning every lesson that our mothers tried to teach us.
This podcast is a production of the Whidbey Environmental Action Network and is made possible by our generous donors. Produced, edited, and mixed by me, Amanda Bullis. Special thanks to Marianne and Steve for their years of service through action and for lending their voices to this podcast. To WEAN's Executive Director, Marnie Jackson, and our board for their leadership. Special thanks to Whidbey musician and WEAN board member, Nathaniel Talbot, for letting us use his track, Intuition, from the album Animal, available on Bandcamp.
Every day on your paycheck, a volume of confidence against the idea of your body being put into your own hands. So please don't hold it, please don't hold it, please don't hold it back. Unleash the power, the straight logic of compassion. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold hard facts. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Stepping out of the shadow of a false man's allegory, slowly erasing that old violence from the story. ocean, slow motion to intelligence, granting the planters, healers, teachers, feelers a new relevance. What I need now ain't that old religion or the code